especially where a lot of black people now, they think of themselves in the Western sense as individuals instead of part of a community or a conduit. And and it manifests in our music, like with hip hop, is designed by individuals to be experienced individually, as opposed to, say, jazz or a West African drum ensemble or a juju band, where everyone has a role and everyone is negotiating a process together as a culture to give to an audience that appreciates it and can give energy so that you don't want to stop playing because it's so much fun. We don't see a whole lot of that anymore. I get these people who are acting on an individual basis. They're doing what's good for them in the moment and not what's good for all of us going forward. And the book work that I'm doing now on George W. Walker, they were in doing this work and bringing it to the fore, I have learned that I can't just tell his story. I have to tell the story of the whole community that he was involved in, because he died broke, because any money that came in was going out to set up new companies, to help young artists, to put back into his company to make it bigger and stronger. And he had a very similar value system to me. And it's interesting to see how he evolved, because originally as a performer.
Do you know that telling a story is one of the most powerful ways to connect with your audience? Do you know that the human brain processes story much more easily and quickly than facts and figure? Stories are a great way to engage your audience, get them interested in your products and services, and inspire them to take action. A good story will help you create more compelling content that can be shared on social media or through other channels. And it's not just about telling a compelling story, it's also about knowing how to tell it effectively. Now, do you want to better connect with your audience? Then join us on our online training class, Storytelling for Content Creators and Digital Entrepreneurs. Come to obehilair14.com/storytelling and learn how to leverage your storytelling skill to earn more as a content creator and digital entrepreneur. Storytelling is a powerful way to connect with your audience, so let's explore it together. See you in the class.
He and his partner, Burt Williams, were they were a duo, a comedy duo kind of a thing, and trying to find a way to be black without having to adhere to white people's expectations. But there were so many white people pretending to be black with the corks on that they had to differentiate themselves and refer to themselves as the two real coons, so that white audiences would know these are real black people doing real black stuff, and it's different from what these fake black folks are doing. So if you really want to see it, you got to come see us. And not only do you got to see us, you got to pay us. And an interesting thing for them was that because we had been so separated from Africa for so long, we were making it up as we were going along, right? Even though we still had vestiges of Africa within us and we knew that we had come from Africa. He and his partner were hired to be part of the San Francisco World's Fair of 1894, where, in keeping with the tradition that was started in Paris in the 1880s, they had human zoos, where they literally made enclosures, and they brought people in from the Philippines, from Africa, from the Pacific Islands, to exist in these little enclosures for white people to peer over, the fence, or look through holes in the gate, or pay admission to get in and see these savages, these examples of lesser humanity, to sort of let the Western European people know that they were so much better, because look at the example, by comparison, look at how much better we are. And there were some people from Dahomey who were displayed in Chicago in 1893 that were brought there by a Belgian named Xavier Penne. And because they were so poorly treated, and because the weather was so cold, and just having to deal with white Americans, these Africans were like, what is going on here? We're done with this. We're going home. So when they went home, Penne had to go back and get more for the next year in 1894 in San Francisco. That's where George Walker and Bert Williams were working in San Francisco. And because the Africans were late in arriving to the human zoo, they had to hire Afro-Americans to pretend to be Africans. And so they did, because, you know, we're all the same, right? And white people really couldn't tell the difference. And so they did that, going off of what they had been told Africa was. But then when the Africans arrived, it completely blew their mind. The cultural sovereignty that they had, the knowledge of the natural world, and their understanding of what was going on around them, the magnanimousness of them. It completely took them by surprise to where they figured, we have to do something. We have to find a way to arrest the identity of what Africa is, do something beautiful with it, and make something that's so amazing that everybody's going to want to see it. So that was 1894. And in 1902, they debuted the play In Dahomey, which was the first Black production on Broadway in the United States. And it was about going back to Africa and reclaiming heritage. It's not a solid story and it's got a lot of problems, but they were making the best out of what they had. It was the very first time, the first Black people to do anything. There's always some extra stuff that's like, but you can't judge them. They had to do what they had to do just to get a foot in the door. But because of their exposure to Africans, it gave them the wherewithal and the fortitude to do what they thought was right. And for me, that's a beautiful thing. And I had a similar experience when I moved to Los Angeles, playing juju music and palm wine music with Ghanaians and Nigerians to see how they carried themselves, how they knew their history, their pride, their ability to just shake things off when racism happened, and things of that nature. And in other ways too, some of them had not been used to it. And when something would happen, they didn't understand why. And it would kind of freak them out because it's something they weren't used to. I'd explain to them, oh, that's because, and I break it down. And they would just be like, wait a minute, what? And sadly, I got used to saying, sorry, man, welcome to America. But I had to say it to a lot of Africans who just had not experienced, like, this is why we are the way that we are. But you'll find other people like me who understand the difference and have the double consciousness and can move forward. A lot of us don't, because it's a difficult road. But I really admire George Walker and Bert Williams and that whole community of people who saw the need and fought that fight, knowing that they were going to be erased and forgotten, because they thought that if they created a big enough swath of cultural, artistic, and artistic examples of beauty, that their magnanimousness would outweigh the detriment of Jim Crow, of racism. And unfortunately, he died 11 years before his partner. And his partner, like I said, with Jackie Robinson, his partner was actually the beta test for assimilation, or what white people call integration, where when George, who handled all the business and did all the dealings and he took all the hits from the white people, so they didn't like him. When he got sick and died, they basically plucked Bert, his partner, out of a Black company, the most powerful company in the country, as far as Black folks are concerned. You know, in 1909, when George took ill, their payroll was $3,000 a week. They fed more than 60 families. They pulled him out of that Black company. Yeah, they pulled him out of that Black company, which destroyed it, and they put him into the Ziegfeld Follies, which was a white show with white actors, white management, and only played to white audiences. So they took him away from Black people, and they call that integration. And they effectively destroyed this Black institution. And sad, because they had two plays that involved Africa. In Dahomey was the first one. The second one was Abyssinia, which was based on real information gathered from an Afro-American who had been to see King Melanek in Ethiopia and brokered the treaty between the United States and Ethiopia in 1902 through Teddy Roosevelt. So that one is a beautiful story, and it's amazing because it became the basis for Bing Crosby and Bob Hope movies that were popular into the 1960s. It's a beautiful play with amazing music. And George's father founded the Colorado African Colonial Society, where he worked for the last, 40 years of his life. No, let's say 20 years of his life to repatriate Black people to a 40,000 acre land grant that he negotiated with the president of Liberia. And of course, it's gone. Like, it's been erased. Like, he's buried in an unmarked grave in Colorado. I found it a couple of years ago, and no one knows. You know, this man died penniless. My guy, George Walker, his grave was left unmarked for almost 10 years. His wife, Ada Overton Walker, who was the greatest dancer in the country at the time of her death in 1914, is buried in Brooklyn. Still, her grave is unmarked.